Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me. Today we're in Truro, Mass on the Outer Cape at the Pilgrim Heights Trail. It's our first stop of many. But before we hit the trail, a little background. Unhappy with their lack of religious freedoms in England and concerned that their children were assimilating too much with Dutch culture in the Netherlands, the Pilgrims sought a new life in America. They first attempted the journey with two ships, but when the Speedwell was deemed unfit for the voyage, all plans rested on a single vessel. The Mayflower made only one voyage to New England. She returned to England in April of 1621 and was more than likely dismantled for timber within a few years. Local legend claims her timbers were reused in a barn in Jordan's, England. This structure known today as the Mayflower Barn. This is a full-scale reproduction of the Mayflower. It was constructed in England between 1955 and 1956 using traditional 17th century methods. It was sailed across the Atlantic to Plymouth in April of 1957, as shown here in this recreation of the famous National Geographic's photograph. As we take this tour together, I want you to picture what it was like in 1620. This ship, just 106 feet long and 25 feet wide, carried 102 passengers and about 30 crew across the Atlantic. This is the capstan. It's mainly used to lift or haul heavy loads onto the ship. We'll see its cousin, the windlass, when we go below deck. This is the whipstaff. It is used to steer the ship. It is connected to the tiller below deck. The helmsman manned this and was dependent upon the command shouted to him from the deck above. This is the great cabin. This is where the captain and other important crew members would have slept. Here's a standard bunk. You can see there's not a lot of room for the tides to toss you around. Here I'm using the handspike to turn the windlass. This is how the crew would have hauled up the 500-pound anchor, using nothing but muscle power. This is the cannon room, and where the whipstaff connects to the tiller, which then would move the rudder back and forth. Not all passengers on the Mayflower were religious pilgrims. About half of them were called saints, which were a group of separatists seeking religious freedoms. The rest were called strangers. They were craftsmen, laborers, and adventurers hired and recruited for the journey. Below deck, everyone lived in one cramped space, barely tall enough to stand, crowded with barrels, bedding, supplies, and livestock. For 66 days, they endured cold, damp air, sickness, and almost no privacy. As we move through the ship, imagine the noise, the smell, and the constant motion of the sea. This was their home for over 2 months. In the words of William Bradford from his book Of Plymouth Plantation, published in 1651.
Being thus long at sea, and the ship being much pestered with people and their provisions, they had long since been much afflicted with seasickness.
These gratings, while providing sunlight on a beautiful day like today, would not have been so forgiving on a stormy day.
In a mighty storm, a lusty young man called John Howland, coming upon some occasion above the gratings, was thrown into the sea. But it pleased God that he caught hold of the topsail halyards, and though he was held under water for a long time, they got him up with a boat hook, and he lived many years after. But it pleased God that there was but 1 or 2 passengers who died in all the voyage, and one of the sailors. There was a child born on board, a son called Oceanus, the son of one Stephen Hopkins. By God's providence, upon the 9th of November following, by break of the day we espied land which we deemed to be Cape Cod, and so afterward it proved. The wind being fair, we stood for the southward to find some place about Hudson's River. But we found ourselves in great danger, for we were near to be cast away before we could get clear of those shoals. We resolved to bear up again for the Cape. And so came that night to anchor in a good harbour therein, being a safe place to ride.
Before setting foot on land, the Pilgrims did face a problem. They were north of their intended destination, which meant their patent for the Virginia Company no longer applied. In this legal vacuum, they feared disorder. I'll let Governor Bradford explain what they agreed to.
This day, before we came to harbour, we thought good to combine together in one body, and to submit to such government and governors as we should, by common consent, agree to make and choose, and set our hands to this that follows word for word.
So, on November 11, 1620, they drafted and signed the Mayflower Compact, agreeing to govern themselves through laws made for the good of the colony. Unlike the Virginia settlement at Jamestown, founded largely as a money-making venture for investors, these were the first seeds of democracy in the New World. Here, in the shadow of this memorial, is where the saints and strangers alike took their first steps into the New World and into their uncertain future together. But for the Wampanoag people, whose ancestors had called this land home for thousands of years, it was a threshold of profound upheaval, a turning point that would forever alter their world. On November 12, 1620, they went ashore for the second time. After leaving their ship in the gray November harbor, ahead, only unknown wilderness. They only had a little fresh water left, and the cold bit hard into their bones. Somewhere beyond the dunes lay the promise of a spring, or nothing at all. Every step was a gamble. With each step through the shifting sands and the tangled brush, they were not just searching for water, but for a foothold in a strange new world. The forest is opening up. We must be getting close. Yep, that's Big Blue off in the distance. Bradford wrote of coming into a valley. Down a slope, through the quiet dunes, they pressed on, not yet knowing the spring that waited below would be their first taste of fresh water in the New World. Or in his own words,
About 10 o'clock we came into a deep valley full of brush and long grass, through which we found little paths, and there we saw a deer and springs of fresh water. We sat down and drunk our first New England water with much delight.
let's take a look at the spring itself. Today, Pilgrims Spring may look just like a muddy hole, but in November of 1620, after weeks of drinking nothing but beer aboard the ship, this was a miracle, a clear, cold source of life. I remember coming here last year with my grandson. Even then, the water was running. A few days into their first explorations, the Pilgrims stumbled upon something unexpected, a cache of carefully stored food. Here's how Governor Bradford described what they found on the hill in Truro, later called Corn Hill.
We came to a place like a grave, but it was larger and longer than any we had yet seen. It was covered with boards, about 3 feet long, one end covered with old mats, and an earthen pot lay therein with a little water in it. We found also in sundry places round about divers fair Indian baskets filled with corn, some yellow, some red, and others mixed with blue. The baskets were round and narrow at the top, covered with mats, and the corn was very fair and good. It being near the setting of the sun, we took as much as we could carry in our arms and went to the boat.
For the Pilgrims, it was an answer to prayers, food that would mean survival through the winter. For the Wampanoag, it was stolen stores and disturbed graves. Even without taking from the dead, the act itself was a trespass they could not ignore. On December 6th, they continued their search along the coast. We are in Eastham at First Encounter Beach, which is known more now for its sunsets than why it's named what it is. As for the events that led to its naming, I'll let Governor Bradford explain.
The sea was rough, so we were forced to row to land. We landed and made us a fire to warm us and took breakfast. After we had refreshed ourselves, we took our muskets and went along the shore to see what we might find. We went to their houses, which we found covered with mats, and some had frames of wood and were made round like a beehive. In them we found wooden bowls, trays and dishes, earthen pots, some corn and beans, and bundles of mats and other things. About the dawning of the day, we heard a great and strange cry, and our sentinels called, "Arm! Arm!" Then all of a sudden a shower of arrows came amongst us. So after we had given them a volley, they ran into the woods.
With a skirmish behind them, the exploring party pressed on along the wintry curve of Cape Cod Bay. For more than a week, they battled cold winds, rough seas, and snow, searching for a safe and fertile place to settle. 4 centuries ago, the men of the Mayflower's third exploration party sailed into a harbor they had never seen before. They found fresh water, cleared fields, and shelter from the sea. Everything they had been searching for since arriving on these shores. Here, William Bradford wrote of that discovery.
We came into a good harbor and a pleasant bay. It is in fashion like a sickle or fishhook. We marched also into the land and found cornfields and little running brooks, a place very good for situation. So we returned to our ship again with good news to the rest of our people, which did much comfort their hearts.
While the Pilgrims saw a new beginning, others saw an uncertain future. The Wampanoag had called this place home for countless of generations, its fields, forests, and waters woven into their lives. In the autumn, around Thanksgiving, we will return here and tell more of their story. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time.